You want to give me a quick sound check, Scott? I'm not hearing you yet. He should be coming through on speaker, the right one. Okay, we're gonna work on the sound here for a sec.
I am very official, yes.
Having a
I'm not hearing it on the TriCaster either. No.
Hey Scott, you want to give me one more sound check? We're gonna reboot the Zoom computer, Scott. It'll take about 5 minutes. For those out there in Zoom land, we apologize. We're having technical difficulties, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. I think I can hear you. Can you give me a sound check?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me, David?
Okay, I can hear you on the computer, but you're still not coming through the system, so let me just give that information back to our one.
Yeah, I could use that. There's a remote up here. But
Okay, you want to give me one more sound check, Scott?
I'm here. Hello, hello.
Okay, one more time, Scott.
I am here. Hello. Good evening.
Okay, keep speaking for us.
Okay. Keeps talking. How now, brown cow?
heard it in
Testing, testing. Planning Commission, Zoom.
You're in. We hear you. Okay, we're good.
Yay.
Lord.
Thank you all for your patience. While we work through those technical difficulties, we'll get started in just a moment.
Good evening and welcome to the December 13th, 2022 regular meeting of the City of Arcata's Planning Commission. This is a public meeting, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment on any item, there are several ways. If you are in Zoom, when the public comment period opens, use the raise your hand icon. You will be unmuted when it's your turn. If you're on your phone, you can also join the meeting and comment by pressing *9. Again, you will be unmuted when it's your turn to speak. If you are in attendance, you can approach the podium and make your comment. Everyone will have 3 minutes to speak. The meeting is now officially called to order, and we will begin with the land acknowledgement. The City of Arcata acknowledges the lands we are located on are the unceded ancestral lands of the Wiyot tribe. The land that Arcata rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Gudini, meaning over the woods or among the redwoods. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments removed the Wiyot and other indigenous people from the land and threatened to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Arcata acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement seeks to aid in the dismantling of legacy narratives of settler colonialism. Sorry about that. That's a mouthful. So Director Loya, can we get a roll call, please?
Yeah, Commissioner Tagney?
Here.
Commissioner Mayer?
Here, and I'd call attention to the video person that I'm not on the screen that I'm seeing. And also that it says September 27th, 2022.
Very keen eye. Commissioner Figueroa?
President.
Vice Chair Davies?
Here.
And Chair Besaid-Alcock?
Here, and at the staff's table, we have David Loya, Director of Community Development, Joe Matier, Senior Planner, and Dilo Freitas, Senior Planner. Is there anyone else, any other staff in attendance?
We're it.
Okay, so oral communications. This time is provided for people to address the commission or submit written communications on matters not on tonight's agenda. At the conclusion of all oral or written communications, the commission may respond to statements. Any request that requires commission action will be set by the commission for a future agenda or referred to staff. Is there any member of the public who has any communication not on tonight's agenda? I think I see somebody coming forward. Yes.
Good evening, Planning Commission and staff and folks in the room and folks on Zoom. My name is Joanne McGarry, And I have made it a habit out of choice to attend in person these meetings, and I'm actually grateful that come the new year, we will have more in-person meetings with all the committee members, commission members, city council members present in the room, and those still are able to zoom in on some of the meetings. But I have noticed when I have tuned in to these meetings at home, I can hear things really well. I can't see things as well, but I would just sort of like to ask that all people up on the dais and at the tables and at this microphone to remember to speak to those who have a little bit of hard of hearing maybe. I am going to get my hearing checked, but speak into your mic, eat the mic type of thing so that we can hear you. There is really difficulty in this room at different spots in this room. And I know masks are also things that muffle the sound a little bit, but I would really love to hear what you have to say, and sometimes I can't. So I'm just asking for that. Second thing, and you didn't start the timer, but I don't worry, I'll be quick. I really appreciate the acknowledgement, that land acknowledgement that is made, and I have requested from the city council that something in writing be presented in our city hall chamber or city hall somewhere, so that people who come into city hall know what we're acknowledging, and not just those of us who attend these meetings. So I know that's maybe a little off the beaten path of your responsibilities, but I just want to have it on record, recorded, that I'm suggesting that of you. My third and final thing is, in all the time I've spent attending these meetings and trying to understand how things work or don't work with our city, the ability to have a design review committee, I understood back when we decided to not have such a thing and then merge it into the planning commission. I kind of thought that sort of made sense for isolated little small project type things, but now as we're moving into really huge things and the bulk of effort is falling on you initially for that, I'm really thinking that come 2023 that our city consider rejuvenating a design review committee for major development issues. So those are the three things. So speak up and let's get the land acknowledgement printed out and posted, and let's revisit the concept of a design review committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Is there anyone online?
Yeah, we do have one speaker online. Go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah, hello. I wanted to be there in person tonight, but I'm actually watching I'm doing dueling Zoom meetings right now. And I'm actually at the same time watching the presentation from the Arcata Fire District board. They're doing the presentation that they were originally going to present to the planning commissioners tonight, and I'm kind of confused and a little disappointed as to why they weren't listed on the agenda, and they aren't there tonight giving the presentation to you. I know back in October was when they originally were supposed to present to you. And then it was November, then it was December, and then now it looks like it may be in January. And I just think, I don't know if someone just forgot to put it on the agenda, or it seems like it just gets kicked down the road. And I think it's really unfortunate and actually quite concerning. So I don't know who was supposed to set the agenda. If it's, I always thought that it was the chair that sets the agenda. So the fact that it's left off, yeah, I'm not sure why it was left off. I know they have some concerns over the mid-rise buildings, so 4 to 8 stories. Staffing is a huge one for them. It's the largest concern that they have. Also equipment and funding, but staffing is a major one. And so I think January is a little too late to be talking with them. It should have been done months and months ago. And I think I know also a concern is standard of coverage should have been done. The fire district believes that should be done by the city and Cal Poly, and preferably collectively together. So the city of Arcata and Cal Poly work together to do a standard of coverage. So anyways, yeah, I'm just kind of disappointed that they're not there talking to you guys. And I know that they'll probably be recording their meeting. And so hopefully you will all watch that presentation, because I think it's crucial. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patricia. Anyone else?
We have no one else online.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the commission and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion on any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, commissioners or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. We don't really have anything. So do we have an motion? Well, first off, does anybody have any ex parte communications regarding the consent calendar? And then do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
We actually, I'm sorry,
Actually
Chair, we
don't
don't have
have
anything on the
Yeah,
consent
I
calendar,
was
so
gonna
you
say,
can
there's
skip
nothing there.
that in the next item as well.
Okay, so we're going to skip that. And we're going to move on to our first public hearing, which is approve a design review and plan development permit review of the Valley East Lofts multifamily development project. Do any commissioners have an ex parte communications to disclose before we get a staff report? No. Okay. Can we get a staff report, please?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll try and be close to the mic, but not so close to the mic, you know. I'll try to be measured in my approach here. Okay, so this item is a design review, permit, and planned development amendments permit as well. It is for the Valley East Lofts project in Valley West. It's located at APN 507-362-057 here in the northern part of town. We're down here at City Hall. And it falls on the intersection of Valley West and Valley East Boulevards. And this is just another visual of where the site is in sort of this core area of Valley West, and then another zoomed in of the site itself. And you can see it's pretty much predominantly surrounded by urban development and is one of the few remaining large-scale sites in Valley West to develop. So this is definitely a key opportunity site in the neighborhood. And this is what it looks like based on street view imagery. We have, I believe it's the Comfort Inn and Suites here directly to the north, and then the Valley East Center development to the east here, which includes some medical developments as well as some existing multifamily in sort of the northeast portion of the site. So a little bit of site history, which was included in your packet, and Joe and David can maybe speak to this more if you have specific questions, but the majority of lands south of the Valley West Shopping Center were included in a PD, which was never ultimately developed, and sites have been developed sort of piecemeal in the interim years. The request tonight from the applicant is to integrate this remaining parcel into the Valley East Center development. And part of that development, when it was approved by the Planning Commission in 2002, which created additional flexibility for residential uses on the site, and created kind of ongoing permissions for the addition of residential within the development in any configuration that was acceptable to the Design Review Commission, which is a duty that the Planning Commission has now taken on. So the summary of the project, it is a 22-unit development, 3 stories. The 3rd floor is primarily loft units. There's 1 parking space provided per unit, which meets our minimum standard, and currently they're proposing to provide 17 covered bike parking spaces, which is over the 50% requirement. We did receive correspondence from a member of the public requesting that the applicant consider going up to 1 space per unit, and the applicant and agent are here tonight and can speak to whether or not that appears to be feasible. And I also wanted to note that the 22 units are provided in a pretty amazingly even split between studios, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, which is something I know the commission has expressed interest in seeing in development projects in previous permits. So I just wanted to run through the elevations really quick. This is the southern elevation, and you can see the proposed shared open space here. The east elevation, which faces the highway here on the bottom. The west elevation, which faces Valley West Boulevard here, and some of the bottom floor units have private fenced open space. This view here actually has the parking lot in the foreground with these garage units in the rear of the parcel. And then the north elevation, which faces the hotel, is down here at the bottom. So we definitely are supporting design review findings for this project that find, basically strong aesthetic compatibility and generally just a very attractive site design and layout. And those findings are outlined in your packet. And we also wanted to highlight some of the requested modifications to typical standards for multifamily projects, which include private open space, shared open space, and also storage spaces. It's important to note that every unit is provided private open space, but it's just typically under the requirement of 150 square feet minimum per unit. Particularly the 2nd and 3rd floor units are provided terraces, which are about 50 square feet as opposed to 150. And the shared open space, is a pretty, well-designed, attractive common patio, south-facing exposure, but it is under the minimum of 1,000 square feet. It comes in at about 650 square feet. And there are shared storage spaces provided on the ground floor here by the utility room and bike parking, and also along the common patio. But again, they are falling short of the minimum of 100 cubic square feet per unit, which the code typically requires. So the draft findings for the PD essentially make the argument that the requested deviations from the standards allow for the project to be designed to a high aesthetic quality and provide a dense number of units, which is a need for the city and for the neighborhood as well. This is due to the qualifying amenities which the development offers, including the architectural and design merit, which I mentioned, as well as the range of unit sizes, the inclusion of amenities in the units like the desks for teleworking spaces, covered bike parking in excess of our standard, and also well-designed landscaping in excess of our standard, which includes a well thought out suite of both native plants and drought-tolerant plants. The project also qualifies for a Class 32 exemption for infill projects. We can make this finding based on these, consistencies that we need to make. It's consistent with our general plan and the intent of our principles for the zone. It is within city limits. It's a small, about half-acre site, substantially surrounded by other urban uses. There is no habitat value on site, and it is served by public utilities, and we are not anticipating any significant impact to air or water quality, traffic, or noise as a result of moving this project forward. So we would like to suggest the Planning Commission approve the project and make the recommendation to adopt a Class 32 CEQA exemption and the action in your staff report with our draft findings, conditions of approval, and the site plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant and agent are in the audience and can also come up to the mic and speak to their project as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to the chair.
Okay, so before we hear from the applicant or their agent and the public, does any member of the commission have any quick questions? Dan, Dave?
Yeah, briefly, shared storage space, can you explain what that is in this setting and what it sorry, closer. Thank you. God. Closer. Okay, I'll start over. Shared storage space, could you just briefly explain what that means in this setting and what code would otherwise require? I'm a little unclear.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a whack at that, and then I'll probably turn it over to Joe or David to further clarify. But the way they're proposing to provide it here is in the utility room. Like I said, with the bike spaces, there would be room to store goods, and then also small storage spaces, which it's my understanding are purely accessible from these two units. So this would be a benefit of having one of these ground floor units with the storage accessible off of their private open space. In other projects, I'm not sure how this has been treated, and maybe Joe could speak to some other examples that he's seen in projects, or David?
This is another one of the common conditions or standards that frequently is not met by multifamily developments. When the city was establishing the land use code and they looked at those provisions for special standards for multifamily development, they went through and tried to think of the tenant, what their needs might be, and they created certain standards and even the facade and how the relationship to the street. And so one of the things that they found is a lot of times these patios and balconies they have for their open space areas are filled with bikes, kayaks, and different things like that. And so they thought, well, why don't we add this condition to have 100 cubic inch, this area, certain sizes that they have that they could access and lock their stuff in for each tenant or each rental unit there. But it is one of those things that because in large developments that happen, they are spread out all over and maybe might not have a lot of consistency with the architectural style of the facility and access to the units. So one unit might have to travel a ways to get to that storage unit itself. But that's kind of the background of that storage requirement there.
Are there any other questions before Judith?
Yeah, I want to ask another question, and perhaps actually direct this to the applicant's agent as well as to staff. The shared common patio space at 650 square feet, significantly less than the 1,000 square feet of the standard, appears to be a design choice, and I'm wondering whether there are alternative designs that the applicant has considered that would comply with the underlying standard of 1,000 feet minimum, and whether staff discussed any of those with the applicant.
Yeah, I think we'd feel more comfortable having the applicant's agent answer that question.
I have a quick question too before, not quite yet. So one of the trade-offs with having the less space, you said in here, was that the Valley West Park is nearby. Can you tell me about the Valley West Park? I did drive by it, but it was already dark. What kind of amenities are there? Is it an actual playground, or what does that park look like?
Sure, yeah. And that is a good point. Thanks for flagging that. I did not mention that in my report, but for the multifamily standards, there is actually a provision in the code which allows the decision makers to make a finding that there is public open space in close enough proximity to the site that the standard can be deviated from. In this case, because it was a PD, we didn't really pursue that as a finding to, bring forward for the commission, but it was in the findings. So thank you. So Valley West Park does include a playground. There is open space. I think there's a basketball court out there now, which was recently painted as like a mural project by Project Rebound. I know CUNA, the Comunidad Unida de Norte Arcata, has been doing events out there. They had a barbecue recently. And I think it definitely sees a lot of use from the surrounding multifamily properties in the neighborhood.
There's 2 parks out there, but I didn't know which one. So that's, yeah. Okay, and that's very close to this project, right?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
about 500 feet to the south, I believe. So yeah, it's quite close. And there's also a transit stop right across the street as well. So it's definitely, you know, a good site for the type of development that is being proposed in staff's opinion.
Okay, so we're going to open the public hearing, and as is customary, would the applicant or his or her representative like to come up and give a little presentation for us and answer some of these questions? And then we'll allow the public to come up too.
Everybody can hear me okay? I know you can in here. Should we? Okay. So, yeah, I hear it now. It's working now. I think it was off there for a second. So, my name's Julian Berg. I'm the architect on the project, working with Will Adams, the owner and developer. He's going to build this with his company. So, it's exciting to be working on this for Arcata, which is also my home. I do have a short list of things I was going to talk about, but I can answer your questions first. So it turns out there was a little miscommunication in the courtyard. The actual paved area, which, you know, is that, or the interlocking pavers are 650 square feet, but that whole rectangle there is, in my quick calculation, is almost 1,200 square feet. So we're actually in pretty good shape, I think, with that, because there are landscape beds around. And in terms of amenities in there, you know, we're going to have tables and chairs, picnic tables, and then there's the trellis covered area where you could have a little seating area as well. We don't have it planned, but you could have a barbecue out there if you wanted, you know. And then I wanted to point out, as Dilo mentioned, all of the first floor units have private outdoor spaces, which are quite, some of them, you know, quite a bit more than 150 square feet. And look at the side areas. I know it's probably a little hard to see there, but if you look at the site plan, they are there. And then the second floor units all have balconies. So, was that your main question? Judith, did you have another question? Oh, the storage?
Yeah, that was my main question, but as long as you're clarifying, the area that you pointed to that was about 1,200 feet, yeah, there's a fence at the southern end, right?
Yes, yeah.
And the decision to put the fence there and then to keep on landscaping out to the sidewalk beyond the fence was?
It was just to give a little bit of a buffer from Valley East Boulevard right there.
Okay, but that area within the fence is not 650 square feet, but 1,200 square feet.
Yeah, it's almost 1,200, yep. I could bring that fence closer to the sidewalk. If you guys are open to that, I'm willing to consider that for sure.
Okay.
To give a little more, you know, common open space for the residents.
Yeah, great. So as long as you're answering a question,
Sure.
another related question, and this is about the landscaping, and I realized I didn't ask it before, but since you're standing there and dialoguing, is that okay, Chair? I noticed that in the landscaping plan, a bunch of the bigger trees were actually drawn in right in front of people's windows, so that they would block light. Is there flexibility in the placement of those bigger trees so that they wouldn't block off people's light?
We could shift them over. Yeah. Let's see, we have the native Ray Hartman ceanothus, white birch. The birches do lose their leaves, so that will help in the wintertime.
In the winter, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is, as Dilo pointed out, it is a busy intersection with traffic, so having the landscape buffer is kind of nice. But
Oh, yeah.
I know it's always a tough balance between that and natural light and sun. So the good news on this is the primary orientation of a lot of the units is south, so, and west. So, you know, they will get a lot of natural light. And I was going to point out in my list that as opposed to a lot of residential development you see these days, we've been able to put windows on several of the sides of each unit. So they're going to have a lot of natural light coming in, and all of the loft apartments have skylights. So it's going to feel really light and airy. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I think we all know that we desperately need more housing. So for me, it's exciting to be working on this because we're creating nice units, you know, that will be in the city of Arcata that will be pleasant to occupy. So just wanted to point that out. And furthermore, we're looking to the future by planning for it to be all electric. There's not going to be any natural gas hookups. We're going to be doing heat pumps for the heating and all electric ranges, and the water heaters are also heat pumps. So I think that's being done on a lot of development in Arcata, but we're ensuring that's going to happen here. So yeah, if any more questions.
Julie and I,
There was the storage.
Oh, the storage, right. Well, each unit does have a fairly significant closet, you know, some of them several closets, so there is storage within the unit. There's the common bike storage. Right here. Do you have the floor plans in front of you? You can kind of see the size of that space. It's mainly for bikes, and there's a motorcycle space in there. So if you had a kayak or whatnot, it wouldn't really work in there. And then 2 of the units have a garage, so there's additional storage there. But we have not provided like an individual locker for each unit.
Where's the on-site manager going to be?
The on-site manager is the unit up in the corner. And that person would have the garage, so you could store ladders, you know, and maintenance things right in there. So let's see, it's unit the 110 up in the northeast corner.
All right, any other questions? Oh, you have.
well, I just want to respond to something Julian brought up. If that patio grew a little bit by just moving that fence out, it feels like it would be a real benefit. Maybe even the fence would be slightly curved, you know, or something. And I like the robust planting of trees. You know, light considered, but I really love to see this thing shrouded with trees. I think it's great.
Thanks. Yeah, the landscape plan was done by Genevieve Schmidt. She owns North Coast Landscaping, and she's really excellent. I've worked with her on a lot of jobs now, and she used to write for a nationally published magazine, so she's pretty smart and well educated when it comes to planting. So I really trust her.
All right, any other questions? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any member of the public who would like to comment on this project?
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Simmons. I'm a member of the Redwood Coalition for Climate and Environmental Responsibility, or ROCKR. First, I just want to say we support this project. Love the housing, love the density, love that it's infill. You received a communication from Colin Fisk about the bike parking. So there are 5 indoor locked bike parking spaces, and then there are 12 parking spaces under a stairwell. And so we were just sort of hoping to see that those parking spaces for the bikes would also have a lock on them. You know, people get their bikes stolen, and we're hoping this can be a, you know, a community that uses bikes, you know, over to the park or over to the transit that's nearby. We'd also just always love to see more bike parking. Currently, there are 17 potential spaces, and there's 22 units. So I guess you guys are above code on this, right? So this is just purely a suggestion, but, you know, something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Joanne McGarry, and boy, is this mic hot. Good. I really appreciate a lot of consideration in this design for light, skylights, orientations, landscaping. I currently live in an old house in the Creamery District that was planted in the yard with a lot of fruit trees, and there was garden space. There's even a grape arbor. And in terms of considering the future, I really appreciate the electrification concept of the household with heat pumps and electric ranges and all that. I'm curious what the rooftop is going to look like, because I think we don't utilize rooftops to the max that we really can in our community for whatever purposes, clotheslines, even if it's only accessible by stairs, but, you know, something to consider of what we're going to do on the roof. I guess when it comes to bike parking, I would like to remind people that all bikes are not the same. I have a trike, and other people have big, huge cargo bikes, and there's electric bikes, and they're not all the same size. So in considering making space for people's non-car vehicles, it would be really interesting to consider the variety of different bicycles that people have and needs to park them safely and not get in the way of somebody. Also, I don't see the plans. I didn't see the plans ahead of time, but in the parking for the automobiles, I'm curious, is it roof covered, and is that roof covered going to be able to be converted, if not immediately, at some point in time, to solar, so that if there's electric vehicles there, they can install a charging station? I mean, thinking about the future and adapting, and maybe things can't happen all at once, but preparing for the future. So fruit trees and rooftops, definitely the electrical, and then, you know, making sure it's appropriate bike space, and parking and solar and the future.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you. Is there any member of the public on Zoom?
Not seeing any.
No? Okay, we'll close the public comment period, unless you have anything that you want to add. Come on up.
I just wanted to clarify, when you say locking parking, what that meant. Is it a bar that you can, you know, attach a lock to, or?
Yes, there's like bike lockers sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Enclosed space with a, you know, padlock on it or a code or something.
Okay.
Just there's a lot of bikes that get stolen.
Right.
And, you know, I think it would be really nice for the 5 people who park their bikes indoors.
Mm-hmm.
Bigger storage area.
The public can't hear Matt, but yeah, maybe
Right.
you guys can talk about this later.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was just wanting some more clarification on bike storage, and he was saying having an actual locker. I just wanted to point out, under the stairs, those would be completely enclosed with a door on each end of the hallway. We're going to do key code access, you know, for the tenants. So those are pretty secure, and they could be locked there, I guess, with some sort of a bar you could attach to. So I don't think we need a locker there. And then, of course, there's the bike storage room. So they're, in this case, I think they're pretty secure. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, do we need more discussion, or do you want to make a motion to approve? One more question, go ahead.
Yeah, as long as we're asking questions and with design significance, that question about covered parking, potentially with PV panels on top, or electric vehicle charging potential, is that something that is part of the project, or that could be?
Dila, do you have the roof plan? You probably don't as part of the package, right?
I don't think
okay.
I have a separate plan sheet for.
Yeah,
the-
there
Okay.
there is a roof
It's-
plan that shows the buildings with the PV panels on one of the buildings, but
Right.
not the other, but it doesn't say anything about the parking.
Yeah, right now, we're not planning solar PV over the parking. You know, I think that would be quite costly, and we have a lot of roof area on this that's available for solar, so it's gonna work out well for that.
So in other words, if you were going to increase solar, it would be more cost effective to just add more to the roof system rather than create a separate structure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
There,
thank you.
I designed shed roofs on this, so you have a tremendous area. So, you know, if you see there, that's a pretty big solar array, and that's only a small portion of the whole roof line, so.
Great.
You know, they could certainly add on in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Do we have
I'm
a-
ready to make a motion.
Okay,
I would like to make a motion that we pass the Adams Plan Development Amendment Design Review Permit.
we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So we're first from Tegna,
Sorry,
and a second.
to interrupt, I'm not looking exactly at what the, if you read the recommendation specifically, it asks that you adopt a California Environmental Quality Act exemption first.
Sorry, I told you wrong. Where is
And
it?
so,
Oh.
yeah, if you just read your recommendation straight off there,
Okay,
that would
yeah,
orient
there we
it
go.
correctly.
All right, I move to approve the Design Review Permit and Plan Development Permit. And now, do you want each of these separately?
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to feel like the police of language here, but
Yeah.
if you read the recommendation off your agenda, it's written specifically the
Okay.
way that we're required now by case
Yep.
law to
Yep.
be completely solidly
All right.
protected against lawsuits.
Here we go. I move to approve the Valley East Lofts Plan Development Permit Amendment and Design Review Permit by adopting, 1, a California Environmental Quality Act exemption per 15332 Class 3-2 infill development projects, and then, 2, the action with findings and conditions of approval as proposed plan set, and proposed plan set.
And I would add that the flexibility for amending the fence to incorporate more area into the outdoor recreation space was noted, and we can do that under director determination of consistency with the approved plan set. That may potentially also require an amendment to the standards. I'll have to double check the frontage on that, but we've noted that in your discussion and would allow for that through the building permit approval process.
Great, thank you.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you very much. Project is approved. Great job.
Yes, congratulations.
So our next is consider an action on the proposed design review permit and hillside development permit for Prior's residential development at 547 Bayside Road. Do we have any ex parte communication from any of the commissioners to disclose? No? Okay, can we get a staff report, please?
Yes, good evening. Joe Mateer, Senior Planner with the City of Arcata, the assigned planner for this project. Before you this evening is the Piers Design Review and hillside development permit at 547 Bayside Road. We are requesting you to consider approval or denial of the design review permit. It's one of those actions that we struggled with. The Planning Commission reviewed a similar one just about a year ago for the Colwell project over on Western Avenue in Arcata. But we've included action and that has findings and conditions of approval that allow flexibility on a decision. So the recommendation in the staff report would be to adopt the CEQA environmental exemption, approve the design review and hillside development permit, or deny the project by adopting an amended action, or provide additional direction to the staff and the applicant on how to modify the project to comport with the findings that the Planning Commission can support. So if you go through the findings of approval, which is found in Attachment A, Exhibit 1, there are some findings that are open-ended. It would have is not, or does not. And so you would direct staff to, the appropriate finding the commission feels comfortable with. The project is, we do have the Exhibit 3 of Attachment A would be the site plan, and also kind of the elevations and floor plan for some of those projects there. Project is located on Bayside Road. This is kind of Samola Boulevard here, and the community center is this area here. Bayside Road takes us down into the Sunnybray area, and the site is here. It's about a 0.7 acre site. It's vacant, and it is adjacent to the Sunnybray Church, which is this property here. The findings of approval, as I mentioned, are flexible, and you can adapt those as the commission feels is appropriate. Some of the architectural design, mass, and scale is in question. The project is before the Planning Commission. It would have design review because the accessory structure is greater in height than the primary structure, the dwelling unit. The dwelling unit is 18 feet, and the accessory structure is about 21 feet. So it's not a big difference, but there is a size difference. And the proposed dwelling unit on the site, the primary purpose of the property would be residential, and that residential unit is about 1,224 square feet. It's a manufactured home. And then there is a 50 by 50 accessory structure that is set back from that as well. And so it's about a 2,500 square foot accessory structure as compared to the primary dwelling unit at 1,224 square feet. So one of the key questions that the Planning Commission is asked is the accessory structure incidental in function and scale to the primary use of the property? Included in the action is the hillside development permit. At one point, we were contemplating, is the hillside development permit really required? There's, according to the site plan and some of the topographical information that we have, it has a overall 14% slope. It is not really what we might consider a forested hillside area, but it is within that mapped area that the general plan adopted. So it does require us to make that finding on this to require a hillside development permit on it. Again, the recommended conditions of approval, you can amend those as you see fit to support the findings of approval. One of the conditions of approval that staff is suggesting is to provide on-site maneuvering area for the recreation vehicle. One of the primary purposes of the accessory structure is the desire for the property owner to have indoor storage for the recreation vehicle. That does kind of dictate the size and dimensions of the accessory structure in some ways. But we felt that the maneuvering area on site didn't really allow the vehicles that enter and exit the property to enter Bayside Road without backing out onto Bayside Road. So that's a key thing that we wanted to do. We spoke with the city engineering department, the agent, and the applicant on this, and we believe that there are provisions that can support an on-site maneuverability and still maintain the allowable site coverage standard. Here's our site plan here. Bayside Road is along here. The 1,200 square foot manufactured home is here. It's about 23 feet from the roadway, and then another 30 feet back would be this accessory structure here. We have the driveway entrance here, 2 parking spaces for the dwelling unit, and then another driveway along here. The RV would park right there. It's a unique structure in that it houses many different uses here, and I'll get to, well, we'll get into that later. This is the manufactured home. It has kind of a board and bat siding. And this would be the elevation from the street. This would be kind of the south side or south east side. And this would be facing the accessory structure. So that this would be kind of the front, and then really the building frontage is there, but from the street side you'd see much of this siding or this elevation here. One of the suggestions was that we do have these double hung windows here, the kind of vertical where they open up. And so these 2 bedroom windows have horizontal sliders. A soft recommendation would be to have consistency with this type of window. There are some egress requirements for standards for building code compliance, and then this is a manufactured home, so we want to make sure that you know, it meets the manufacturer specifications as far as egress. And so this could be a reason why these windows are this style, because they would meet the current egress requirements according to the standards for manufactured homes. Here's an elevation of the accessory structure. My understanding is that the 2 units or the 2 structures will be painted in similar and compatible. This is about 21 feet, just over 21 feet in height. This would be at a slight angle. If we go back to the site plan, you can see it would be this, what we're looking at is here. So the vehicle would pull in. The highest point of the structure is in this area. Of course, that is driven by the size of the vehicle here. It's a sloped roof, a shed roof, going up from about 21 feet to 8 feet in height here. Oops. We do have windows up in the north, and then of course this nice architectural feature to break up the largest mass on this wall here, on this wall plane. Overhead weather protection on one of the doors, person doors there. This is the opposite side. And what is unique about this structure is that it includes the RV parking. There's other shop space and storage areas. There's a full bathroom, hot tub areas in this area. And then there is a greenhouse with earthen floors in here. So this one structure has multiple uses in it. And so it does have asphalt comp roof shingles here. And then this is clear polycarbonate sunroof material here. A lot of windows, a lot of different style windows, awnings, French doors here open up. And then we have the garage door here. And they do have looking at a different design for the garage door is more custom. And you know, it has a different pattern that starts out with a higher density at top and then gets to a lower density here. So they are looking at a custom door for this garage door here. And then again, these size windows here are different shapes and styles of windows, again to create additional glazing for the greenhouse. And then this side would be the opposite of that. Here would be the entrance to the hot tub, and then here's the shop space itself. I don't have a floor plan with this PowerPoint presentation, but it is included in your packet. You can see the different uses there. That is basically it. We do have a, oops, there's one slide missing. Go back to the recommendation. is to consider the project, and the key question is, can you find the accessory structure incidental in size and function to the purpose of the property? It's a large lot. It's over 30,000 square feet. It does slope off a little bit from Bayside Road down. The area is a mix of different types of buildings. Right to the south of that is the Sunnybrae Church. And then there's also multifamily structures. Multifamily structures here, multifamily here. The site is here, the church is here. You get into some commercial uses here. These are all multifamily here. Bayside Road, or Bayside Court comes down here, and there's multiple multifamily structures there. This is the Masonic Temple here, and then the North Coast Preparatory Academy is there as well. So we do have a mix. I would say this is more of your large lot, traditional looking at your forested hillside or residential very low density, where it is definitely a forested hillside and steep slopes. I do have a quick topography showing here. It's just unfortunate that you don't see a lot of it with this, but it's very tight density with contour lines, 1 foot contours. And this is the subject property where it's much different than, you know, here's just line after line right there, but there's quite a bit of space. You get a lot of run for that. Anyway, I would be happy to answer any questions for the Planning Commission. I know that the property owner is present, and I think the agent might be trying to be on Zoom as well to answer any questions, but I would be happy to answer any questions if I can. Pass it over to the chair.
Thank you.
If I could
who
just,
wants to
I'm sorry, if I could just add one thing to the discussion. Joe did mention this, but I just wanted to, bring it home for the Planning Commission before you enter your deliberations, that this is real similar to a project that you did about a year ago, where the accessory structure was actually larger than the primary use on the site, and you found that one compatible largely around findings of, that it maintained the use, that it could convert the use in the future, and that visually that the use appeared similar. And so you have a precedent of, making these kinds of decisions before, and staff bringing to you, a question as opposed to a very well thought out set of findings. And so that's really our intent tonight, is not necessarily to recommend that you deny, but to ask the question. We see merit in this project. It doesn't fit neatly into the little boxes that we've created with our codes. And we think that this site is large enough, and I think the reason why Joe was describing the other uses around the site is that there's a real mix of different use types. So this mix of use types would potentially be compatible. We wanted to have the Planning Commission be the ones to really vet that out. And so I'd encourage you to think through that as you're making your deliberations. Clearly, you can't make the strict finding that this structure is smaller than the other structure. It just isn't. But you could make the findings that in terms of the use, that it's incidental, and you might be able to approve the project based on that.
Okay, thank you. And then I assume you're talking about the property merger where there was an existing small house and they merged the property and added a garage or something. It's a little bit different than this one, but I understand it is comparable. So who wants to start? Everybody probably has questions. Judith, go ahead.
Like maybe we should start at the other end this time, but I'm happy to speak first. A couple of questions. First, the hillside development permit with the 14% slope. The slope is not quite what we would usually require a hillside development permit for. So I'm wondering why the hillside development permit here.
Yes, that comes off of a general plan map on kind of a hazards map, public safety. And the mapping at that time, when it was adopted in 2000, you know, it kind of, I think, averaged a lot of the slope across the street there. And it clearly is in that hillside map. I could pull that up if you give me a moment, but and it just captures this property and then goes along Bayside Road towards town a little bit and grabs a couple others. I was really surprised, you know, because when you look at it, we wouldn't characterize this as a forested hillside. And I didn't think we had any hillside properties in the coastal zone. And this is one of the very few parcels that's in the coastal zone. So yeah, I think your observation was correct and similar to what we had. But we felt that, you know, the code does state if there is development in these mapped areas that we do a hillside development permit for it. So that's why we did it. The property owner, we had many discussions before they purchased the property. And, you know, I was guiding them towards, you know, hey, it doesn't look like there's any steep slopes. A lot of it is based on 25% or even 15%. But, you know, after discussion on the staff level, we decided that it was important for us to add that. But again, I think that's one of those areas that the Planning Commission could, you know, take a look at and use your discretion in that. I would say implications of a hillside development standards, it already is a residential very low density zoning district. Those are our large lots, and they do have limitations on the type of development that can occur there. The development standards are for like the floor area ratios, 20%. This project has 11%, so they do have area for that. The site coverage is 20%, and they're at 19%, but they can create additional driveway area for that maneuvering space by utilizing pervious paver systems, which are not considered site coverage. So they do have flexibility there. The one thing that I would say, if I was the property owner, be concerned about would be the designation of 50% of the lot area as a natural area. And I think that would limit some of the flexibility. I talked to the property owner about it, and I said, you look at a lot of our hillside areas that have mapped areas, and it is a wide range. Some of them are very park-like settings, and some are, you know, really raw natural areas that might have a lot of exotic, you know, invasive plant species in there. And there's other stewards that do take care of the property and really have a nice, you know, natural area. They kind of have that stewardships for that.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be the follow-on to that question. In the findings, it does require that the applicant shall map 50% of the lot area as a natural area as a condition of approval. And, you know, under the new regs, apparently the site could be subdivided. And several more units could be placed on it, although with the coastal zone restrictions, I'm not sure how that would jive with that. I'm wondering if staff has kind of thought through any of those implications with regard to this particular site plan.
Our staff certainly struggles and stays up at night thinking about the state legislature's actions and how we apply it to some of our regulations. So, but in this particular one, I don't think I really, or we really contemplated the future development or subdivision of this property at this time, based on the application material, you know, and speaking with the applicant, we didn't look at that as a detriment to it. I know that the concern of the hillside development standards we have in regards to Senate Bill 9 and the urban lot split and the kind of the two units on those has come into play. And I think in some areas of the community, we're really going to have to struggle with those questions because they are what we might consider very steep slopes and you know, want to protect the hillsides for those purposes. But in this case, to be honest with you, I don't think it's that much of a concern for hillside slopes instability on the site.
Okay, third question, which may be something other people are going to ask. We have some elevations of both of the buildings. We have no elevation, no picture whatsoever that would represent what the site would look like with both of those buildings from the street, which is something that our design review really would be primarily concerned with. And it, because it does slope down, it could, it could look really insignificant from the street in terms of that additional height. And I would love to just be able to visualize that, and there's nothing in this packet that lets me do that. So does staff have access to any of those drawings that perhaps we don't?
We didn't do any mock-ups, renditions of the site for this. There is going to be definitely some slope drop off there, and the height difference is like 3-4 feet on that. And so I would imagine that you're very much correct. And from the public view areas of Bayside Road, you might not see that a dramatic height difference between the structures. And the placement of this structure here in front of it, as you're passing, as you're walking, it's going to be a different story. But as you're passing by at the 25 miles an hour, you'll get glimpses of it in each direction on either side of this structure here. But I think for the most part, it's going to be really obscured by the placement of it on the site and the topography of it. And
I'd also just add that there's nothing in our application checklist that would require that. I do think that is something that you're gonna have to use your imagination to get a sense for how this project would look from the street. So it would considerably increase the cost of the application process for them to hire a consultant to prepare those kinds of drawings for something that's speculative that they're not sure is going to get built.
Right, but in terms of what we need to do in design review, it's an essential part of being able to say whether that very large accessory structure is actually dominant or not. And I think without that, it's really going to be hard to say.
Joe, there was reference to height being the trigger for this not being a subordinate structure. And in the packet, I think there was reference to square footage, and I'm wondering which is more important from the staff perspective.
The code section is under the accessory structures, and it's both of those are in the same code section. So it's explicit that says if the accessory structure is greater in height than the primary structure, then design review is required. This would have been administrative design review because it's not located in a neighborhood conservation area, and the size and the number of dwelling units did not require necessarily a discretionary permit. The trigger was the incidental and scale was the question, similar to the project that was a year ago on Western, where staff, we're sitting in our box and we're looking at this and we're like, yeah, we have a 1,200 square foot residence and a 2,500 square foot shop. It doesn't comport directly with our code. As far as importance, I think that, the director really characterized it, and I appreciate his statements about how we kind of struggled with this and would like the, some guidance from the Planning Commission on these. And I think that each situation or each site is unique, and you'd have to evaluate that on that.
Okay, so both the square footage and height are triggers in this case. My next question is about ADU, that there's a full bathroom in this structure, is like halfway there almost. It feels to me like towards ADU, since bathrooms are so expensive. And I think, as I recall on Western, that there was part of the discussion there was that that building was being built as a shop with the idea that it could easily be converted into housing later. Is that, am I recalling that correctly?
Correct.
Okay. So if this one already has a bathroom, I imagine you've had dialogue with the applicant about what kind of tweaks it would take to follow that same path. Like, hey, this is a potential ADU in the future. And then here's the real question I have to you. If it was outlined in that direction, would it be way easier to justify this project?
I think so, you know, because you could easily have this accessory structure be the primary unit, and that would be the primary use, and then the resident up front, the 1,200 square foot, would be the accessory dwelling unit.
So did you have dialogue then with the applicant about that? And is there some reason why we're not just, is it cost, or that's just not what they want to do at this point, or?
Yeah, we did have discussions with the agent and the property owner with this, but I think, you know, I'll let them speak to it. I mean, this is their project and their dream, you know.
Okay,
so.
All good. Last question for me is, there's an indication of some trees being removed out towards Bayside, and I don't recall if those are part of the eucalyptus scene in Bayside. If somebody could remind me what trees we see along the frontage of this property, and how many of them are going to be removed. I can't tell. There's arrows to a few of them, but I have really no idea.
Yeah, there's just some small trees. They're, I think, 4 and 6 inches in diameter, so they're just like shrubs. And these really, if you looked at this, you'd consider that, oh, that must be a large tree. No, those are just shrubs that have been, some of it's already been cleared out. For
okay, so there really isn't much screening type vegetation along the front here.
Correct.
Is there?
We do have some back. I do want to say there are some mature trees back in this area, and no trees are going to be removed. No eucalyptus trees are being removed. Yeah. And then these just small ones are here for building purposes, to get those out of the way for the structure.
Okay. Along those lines, do we consider vegetation a condition as visual barrier, or is it too temporary? Like the next owner could just cut them all down and then you just lost your visual screen.
In my opinion, I believe that when the vegetation is on your property, you manage it. You can manage it as a screen, a living screen. When projects are trying to utilize vegetation that they have no control over, it's not on their property, I think that has less importance of being able to ensure that that's going to be maintained over time.
Okay, well, it looks to me from this overhead view that there's a great opportunity between the storage building and the Bayside Road to have, you know, a grove of screen, a grove of birch or something that would naturalize and really visually block the bit of this that you would see from the road, because, you know, part of our design review challenge is neighborhood compatibility. This building doesn't look like anything else around, so we have to work that out amongst ourselves. But if it really were screened, if you really didn't see it much, it's a large parcel. You know, I think it's a cool building in many respects, and I get that the applicant's creating their dream space. It sounds wonderful. But if neighborhood compatibility and design review stuff is a challenge for us, can we, and I guess this is more of a commission question, and we can touch this on deliberations, just condition a visual screen of trees, vegetation, and they could be natives, they could be something that somebody else helps design, I don't know. But if we just don't want to see it from the road, that doesn't look hard. And I yield there. Thank you.
I got a comment, yeah. Yeah, it looks, just based on looking at the topography, you know, I don't know where they got the topo actually from, whether they went out there and surveyed it, or if it was just generated from our 1-foot contours. But it looks like they got at least 10 feet of relief from, you know, just the northwest corner, northeast corner to where the new structure's at. So it's gonna be topographically lower, probably same roof elevation as the one up front. So I feel, you know, that's going to be enough, you know, that should, I don't know if it's going to be sufficient, but, you know, at least it's not going to be, you know, projecting above the residents in the front. The other thing I was wondering about is, you know, specifically, you know, regarding the components of the hillside development permit, I noticed we aren't requesting a geotechnical report specific to the permit. Are we going to still be requesting a geotechnical report for the development for foundational purposes and grading? I'm assuming because of that 10-foot and, you know, relief to develop the pad for, I'm assuming, the residents. It appears they're doing a stepped foundation, perimeter foundation for the other structure, as it appears by the elevations, you know, the drawings that were provided. Is that something that's going to be considered as the permitting moves forward?
That could, the building official could determine that a soils report is required according to the building code. And if the planning commission feels that they would like to have that up front before they, as part of their approval, you know, certainly that could be condition of approval to consider as well.
Yeah, having done projects in the city of Arcata regarding hillside development, you know, this is a pretty non-issue in regards of hill slope stability. I feel it's more of the need is more for grading specifically, and also, you know, the other elements that are associated, because I worked on the apartment complex next door for the addition. And I know there is a water course along the backside, on the other side of the eucalyptus trees there. So in regards of erosion and sediment control. So, okay, I was just wondering regarding that, because I noticed that. Yeah, but I feel if we don't know what it looks like from the roadway, and if there is an opportunity for, you know, for the visual, if it's needed, you know, specifically not from the roadway, but from the approaches in either direction, maybe that may be something that may need to be considered. Specifically, I'd imagine more near the southern boundary, since it's a vacant parcel and no trees on that property. So, just comments.
Okay, any other questions for staff, or shall we hear from the applicant? Okay.
Hello, my name is Kurt Pierce. I'm the applicant. My wife and I are artists. Well, my wife's the artist, I'm the engineer. And we have 2 award-winning vehicles. One is our RV, and the Mini Cooper, which you may have seen driving around town. They won the first prize in the daily driver category at the Houston Art Car Festival. So that's the prestigious art car festival in the United States. So one of the things that we wanted to do is have a motorhome garage to park our RV and art car in. And to have a motorhome garage, you're going to have it so high and so wide in order to get the vehicle in there. And that's why this structure is big. It also includes a work area that we can work on art projects. I worked with my wife on some quadricycle vehicles, and we'd like to be able to work on that when we retire and do other art projects. We also, when we had our Oakland garden, we had a house in Oakland, and we had landscaped it. My wife did most of the landscaping. I helped her a lot. I did all the low watering, the drip systems and things like that. And she did all the curating of the garden. It was on the the stopwaste.org Bay-Friendly Garden Tours, because it was exemplary in lots of things that we did that were Bay-friendly. We hope to do the same thing with this property, make it friendly to the environment. Part of the reason we have this all as one structure rather than 3 separate structures is because there are things that work together that work really well. The greenhouse will bring in warmth so that when we can work in the shop, we don't actually have to heat it. The dormers at the top that you saw, that's designed so that they open up and they pull a draft of air through. So when it gets too hot, it pulls the air out. So it's all very passive. We just open up the windows and the whole thing evacuates the heat if necessary. The hot tub is in there because the hot tub with the foliage in the greenhouse we thought was a beautiful thing to have together. My wife wants to have a lot of, she went to culinary school, so we're going to grow lots of herbs and vegetables in the greenhouse area. And we have desire to grow other kinds of plants like flowers and whatnot in that area, depending on how it, and I'd like to try doing some hydroponic gardening in there, and that's why we have the greenhouse as well. As far as dealing with the elevations, I can talk a little bit about that. Bayside comes down from up at the top right here. It comes down from the top section down. And when you're coming down the road from Bayside and you look that direction, there is a bunch of trees back in the corner there from both the neighbors. Oh, great. In the neighbor's property and in our property right here that kind of block the view, so you're not really seeing this. This is an 18-foot tall building that's a few feet down from the road. The road is about level here, but up here there's like a 10-foot drop off the road, and then the property starts. Well, at least from our perspective, there's nothing we can do that's close to the road because the road sort of has been built up there. This has a 18-foot roof. This has a 21-foot roof, but it's actually 3 feet lower than this here because this is actually being placed below this. So it's about the same roof. And actually, if you're looking at it from Bayside, they look like 2 roofs that are kind of similar. Additionally, this entire section here is designed to put solar on top of it. We want to be able to put solar in this summer, or the coming summer, to basically power everything, and a battery system so that we can be on battery backup and also feed power back into the grid. As far as the gravel driveway, we are talking about replacing it with permeable pavers so that there is a larger turnaround here. It will also take this from being part of that 20% limitation to not being part of that 20% limitation. In that case, we'll have about 16% coverage instead of about 20%. And then we'll have, with the permeable pavers, another 6% of the ground covered by the permeable pavers with the turnaround. That was as a recommendation from the staff, and we totally agreed with it. That was a good idea. As far as this area here will be kind of more of a terraced garden area if it's allowed. If we're under the hillside requirement that 50% of the property not be developed or in any sort of way, we might not be able to terrace it. So we'll just try to grow it naturally if we have to. There's a lot of invasive plants in here, pampas grass in particular, that are non-native species that we will endeavor to get rid of. We're totally into getting, that's what we did in Oakland, was get things that are native from the area to put in there. and to make it look beautiful. The eucalyptus trees are all down in the bottom here, along this side here. And we don't intend to do anything with the eucalyptus trees other than clean them up if there's problems. But otherwise, they can stay naturally the way they are. Was there any questions specifically that I can address?
I don't think so. Thank you. Oh,
I'll ask
yes.
one.
Yes, we do.
Where are you at with the concept of developing this building so that it has a potential future as an ADU?
Oh, yes. So we talked about that. And the only thing that's lacking is that we could take the closet, add a window, and make it into a bedroom, and then add a kitchen. So technically, it's easy to convert, whether we do it eventually or it really depends on, right now, the idea is we're going to park the RV in there and then we're going to work on our artwork in that area. If it becomes, something like, okay, well, we're now getting up in age and we don't need to do artwork, converting it to living is something that we could do or the future owners could do. It very definitely can be converted in there. I've actually had them put in a few extra power so that it can be converted someday.
So you are thinking that way in your development and design, huh?
Yes, after we were told that we could actually do it, because when we originally bought the property, it's listing as very low density, single family dwelling. It seemed apparent to us that there were certain limitations of what we could do or not do on the property. And having that being a dwelling unit and this also being a dwelling unit kind of scared us a little bit when we were first deciding to build here. So at the time, we didn't feel like we needed a second dwelling unit there. A lot of people have what's called a barn dominium, where they pull the RV in and it's got a condo attached to it effectively. And at the time, we thought, well, we don't need that, but maybe eventually we would.
Okay. Any further questions? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any member of the community who would like to please step forward? Joanne?
Hi, my name's Joanne McGarry, and I really appreciate this gentleman's vision for this property, and it's contrary, or it's not at all as controversial as the place out on Indianola that was being discussed in the county in terms of coastal zone and size and development of the property out there. So I really appreciate coming from Oakland with a vision of environmental consciousness and awareness for the future. And I do hope that the coastal zoning of this property does not allow for the subdivision of it in the future, and that biodiversity is the big discussion in Montreal right now, and as much as we can save some certain habitats in our own community, it's really nice to know that these people are really thinking in that direction. So I, as a resident of the community, welcome you and thank you for a lot of the consideration you put into this.
Thank you. Anyone else? Is there anyone online?
No one online's raised their hand.
Okay, so we will, turn that off and close the public comment portion of this, and it's time for commissioner deliberations. Does anyone have any follow-up questions or?
I do. Do we have any say-so about the hillside development at this point?
In terms of?
Having this property described under the hillside development restrictions, and I get that it's on a map, but it sounded like it doesn't necessarily fit that criteria, and if it's up to us, could we, in this setting, remove it from the hillside development standards.
I think what I would advise, because the applicability section usually gives some, basis for a permit. There have been a couple of director determinations, zoning administrator determinations around applicability sections. When this first came to our attention, we did take a look at it and tried to evaluate whether there was a way to, develop an interpretation that exempted properties that had, less than 15% slopes across the entire property. Because we did recognize that the mapping for that map was done on such a gross scale that there's no way it could have caught, particular properties. And I cannot find a way to ignore the fact that it is mapped. The applicability section literally says if it's on this map, it requires a hillside development permit. There's absolutely no concerns or issues that are raised in the hillside section that would be triggered for this site. Any of the site design standards or hill slopes or unstable slopes. All of that is not applicable on this property. To Commissioner Figueroa's point, we did not ask for a geotech report in advance because it seems like it would have been good money after bad to ask them to do, a detailed study. We figured we'd leave it to the building permit stage, and, whatever is required for a foundations report, we would consider having met that requirement. The other stickler that, Joe had brought up, and I saw Commissioner Mayer kind of indicate some body language that said, yeah, that does seem like kind of an overreach, was the 50% natural area. Those are intended on sites. If you read the chapter, those are intended on sites where you're really acknowledging that you have a legal parcel, you have the legal right to develop it, but we're going to extract the ability to develop anywhere else on this property by requiring 50% set aside for these. So I guess, long story short, what I'm leading up to is that I think that the commission has the discretionary authority to reduce, minimize, or potentially eliminate some of those requirements in the hillside development permit section, but still issue a hillside development permit. And so if you wished to say that, in this instance, you'd want to see a reduced setback, that you don't see the requirement for a 50% natural area identification, I think you could go there. I don't think you have the authority to say that a hillside development permit isn't required.
Thank you. I would like to discuss with the commission then to reduce this 50% natural area, considering that it's mostly eucalyptus and pampas grass, and probably some other non-natives. So what is it that we're preserving or keeping the applicant from changing? So anyway, that just on the back burner for deliberations. And I would like to touch base with the commission on if we think it's appropriate to do any kind of visual landscape screening up towards the Bayside Road edge of this project.
Okay, that 50% natural area requirement for the hillside development permit, I'm wondering what's considered natural area and whether, a ceanothus garden, for example, or some other not particularly building-ish gardening would still be considered natural area. Does staff have any definition for us on that with reference to hillside development? Because it does sound like what the applicant was describing would fit quite neatly in the definition of natural area, in which case it's kind of moot unless they want to subdivide it and put another few houses on the back end of the property, which is why I asked about that. Do we have a definition for natural area in the context of hillside development?
Joe may have something to add to this as well, but basically the natural areas are, I'll look to see if we can find a definition for that to read to you. But basically, the way that it's described throughout the code section is that it's intended to be not developed, not inhabited. The idea is that there are areas where they're completely left in a natural state, and so the natural areas.
Yeah, if the natural area is pampas grass and eucalyptus, a little bit of gardening could actually be a significant improvement and a great benefit to the city. So I'm just wondering how much latitude the owner would have in terms of, gardening and landscaping within that definition.
I think if it qualified as, true habitat restoration, we'd say, yeah, that's consistent with the natural area. If the planning commission wanted to designate, half of this property as natural area, not that some natural areas aren't used for these purposes, but, gazebos, gardens, those kinds of things wouldn't be considered natural area. A walking path probably would be okay.
Okay, and the other area, Dan, that you mentioned, the screening from the street, I actually go by that area a couple of times a day. It's sort of on my commute, and on my walking and biking routes as well. And frankly, anything that you could put on that would screen it entirely would add to the sort of creepiness of walking along that route as, a woman where you're already not protected from the street by a curb. And if it looks good, I'd way prefer to actually be able to look into the property rather than to have it, creepily screened on a walking and biking route. So that's just sort of my familiarity speaking there, where I actually I like to not have those properties on the bay side of that street screened, because too much vegetation there, it actually feels to me like a safety problem.
Yeah, I can see you're going into the eucalyptus tunnel there. Essentially, there's definitely like a vegetative tunnel there on that street at that point there. One thing I'd mention, I imagine the intent for keeping 50% natural area specific to hillside development is specifically associated with hillside stability. You know what I mean? So if we're really talking about keeping a natural area in relationship to its concept for the hillside development, that makes sense. But if we're not actively, keeping roots and trees and stuff like that to stabilize a slope, then reducing that natural area, I imagine, isn't too far-fetched, because we're not trying to stabilize something outside of, stabilizing sediment from disturbance or whatever. But, the intent is for trees to stay, so the whole, your property doesn't slide down in your neighbor's. So I feel, I think it would be appropriate, that you mentioned reducing that natural coverage. It'd be interesting though, what caveat would we have to, do we just say it's just reduced? Or would we say, do we get a biological or botanical assessment to make sure that it is good to go and there's not something in the pampas grass and the eucalyptus, like those California native plants that are there, potentially, I don't know. But, just throwing that out there, or we just say that, in good faith, that we just reduce it.
Can I ask a question of staff?
Please.
Is this not the property where Arcata Fire did a scheduled burn and burned a previous building on this lot as a practice burn many years ago?
I don't recall that. I've been here about 30 years, and I don't recall a practice fire there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was a building there that Archaea, it may well have been more than 30 years ago, but regardless, it seems to me that everything that's there now has really grown up pretty recently, and it doesn't look like there's anything particularly, as has been said, native as far as, you know, just the proliferation of kind of invasive species. And yeah, thank you for that.
So can we talk about the accessory structure not being subordinate to the primary? What did we as this commission feel about that? Because to me, that was the biggest issue that I had.
This is one where we do have that precedent before, and I think the important thing here is that we recognize the unique situation of particular properties and the intention of that rule, and ensure that the intention of not sort of circumventing the rule in a gotcha sort of way is not something that we're supporting, but the topography of this site, in fact, will make the accessory structure, which the applicant, if necessary, could change the designation for, a less dominant feature than it would otherwise be on a different site. And so I feel like if we recognize the need to see the unique characteristics of these sites, that I would be willing to recognize that, yes, the structure is bigger, but that in this case, the overall intention of that rule is not something that we're really abusing. We're not putting some huge dominant feature onto the landscape if we approve it, that would otherwise just be prohibited for the sake of prohibiting it. I don't think that the large structure in the back is going to look like a dominant, you know, humongous thing from the street. And that's the aspect of design review I think we should be considering. In this case also, I'm wondering about, you know, the geotechnical issues, and which relate to that again. Just on the other side of the water course, where NPA has their middle school campus, in a previous application, there was evidence of an earthquake trace just below the road. I don't know if it continues. Nobody knows if it continues on the this property's side of the watercourse, but I would even say that, you know, if necessary, those structures might move further back onto the site, so that there's no question at all of a possible earthquake trace affecting them. And that's, again, it would be a building permit thing, but it would affect the site plan if it turns out that that would be a wiser course of action. If that were the case, that back structure would be even less dominant than it is further front on the site.
Well, if it was a school, that's why we had to pay so much attention to the I mean, that was the reason.
Right,
So
right, exactly.
You'll be fine.
No, it would be fine, but just in terms of, you don't want ripples in your brand new driveway. I think that given that there is that slope and that the back structure may be larger, but it's not going to look larger or humongous from the street, that the principle behind that rule is still being respected.
Yeah, I feel like as long as it's easily convertible, we need to kind of let that go and allow that. I admit, in the beginning, I really didn't like this project. I didn't understand it, but now that I do understand it, so that was my big issue was the assess, that's not to code. But I understand it now. Then I also didn't get an answer to the question about backing the RV and your car, your Cooper, onto, are you going to have to back onto Bayside Road? Because that's, no, Joe's saying no. Did you guys work that out?
The project is conditioned to require a turnaround for the RV on the site, so they can
Okay.
pull out head first.
So again, my only issue is, are we going to be able to overcome the accessory structure being so much larger than the primary? Are we going to be able to get past that? And if we can, then we are probably ready to move forward.
I'm
So-
able to get past that.
Okay.
And I appreciate that there's a full bathroom in here and plumbing and wiring that can support a future ADU conversion, which is the exact same topic we had on Western in a much, much tighter neighborhood. This is 3/4 of an acre, is that what I recall? And it, the way that area is developed, it feels like this large structure is gonna be kind of dwarfed by the scale of other things around. I'm all for it.
Scott, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I agree. I can get past that. I agree with Dan and Judith, and I think we do have, considering things case by case. I'm in support and can get past that point.
Okay, are we ready for a motion, or do we still have things that we need to discuss?
I would just like to clarify, because we've been kicking it around, whether or not we want to tackle this hillside development 50% natural area topic. Do they replant natives? Is that, if that's not even a requirement, then are they supposed to leave the pampas grass alone? I don't know. I mean, it's confusing to me, and it feels like like this just doesn't fit. So this would be our opportunity to, if we're able to just remove that piece of the requirement. Let it be on the hillside map. We can't change that designation, but if we can change the 50% natural area, I think any future landscaping will be a lot better than what I think the non-native pampas grass and eucalyptus are representing right now for the environment.
Well, would we need a code amendment for that? We couldn't do that right now, right?
Well, no, you can. So the reason why we put it in as a condition of approval is because under code section 952040 A2, it says that basically any legally created lot, undeveloped lot shall comply with the following. A minimum 50% of the area of each lot shall be designated as a natural area. Again, natural area meaning just that it's not developed, and that would include things like placing gardens. But then in subsection F of 952070, under the procedures for hillside development permit, it states that exceptions to the standards may be granted by the review authority only where it first finds that one of two things. The first one you can't find, but the second one says the exception will result in less visual impact than would development in compliance with the standard being adjusted. And so before you have your discussions, I wanted you to be fully aware of the finding that you would have to make in order to reduce that 50% area. You'd be stating that we're reducing the 50% to some smaller percentage. Perhaps a 20-foot setback from the rear parcel line or something like that. And that in order to do so, you would say that the exception is going to result in a less visual impact than would development in compliance with the standard being adjusted. I want you to be fully aware of the finding you'd have to make before you have the discussion.
A less visual impact.
The exception will result in less visual impact than would development in compliance with the standard being adjusted. I think what's intended here generally is that, for instance, homes aren't supposed to be placed on ridgeline. You're not supposed to be able to view them silhouetted against the sky. If for some reason placing it on the ridgeline would have actually, in fact, given the conditions on the ground, less visual impact, it allows the review authority to adjust those standards. This applies to all of the standards within this section, though. And so, again, we've had some discussions recently about how you make your findings. These are left to your discretion. You don't have to go into great and grave detail as to why you believe that may be the case. But if you found in this particular instance, given the conditions on the ground, what I think I heard one commissioner state was that it feels like we're, and I'm paraphrasing here, but feels like we're just, requiring this for the sake of requiring it because it's in the code, even though it doesn't seem to apply in this particular parcel. And so if you can get yourself to the incremental position that it's at least as visually impactful and maybe slightly less visually impactful to not have the 50% area, then you can make that exception. If you can't get yourselves there, then I would save yourselves the trouble of having a lengthy discussion around whether to reduce that and just require the 50% and move forward with some approval.
Yeah, thank you, David, for that clarification. My sense is that because the basis for our findings are limited to just those two possibilities, that as long as it's within that hillside development mapped area, we should allow that 50% natural area requirement to remain, and that if at some point in the future the owner wishes to ask for that to be changed for some development purpose or even some extreme gardening purpose, that's something that the owner can address at that point. But it does seem as though our possible findings here are pretty limited. It doesn't seem like it would pose a problem to the applicant's current site plan or intended uses. And I would be willing to recommend for approval with that condition.
Okay. Sure. I'd like to make a motion. Unless Scott has any more deliberations on this subject.
Nope, go ahead, Dan, I'm ready.
Okay. I move to approve. Oh, boy. To read the recommendation again, right? Steph?
Yeah, and unfortunately, the one on the...
All right. Approval of the design review permit and hillside development permit to develop a primary dwelling unit with a detached accessory structure. And 1, to adopt a Class 3 CEQA guideline, Section 15303, new construction or conversions of small structures categorical exemption, and then approve the design review and hillside development permits by adopting the amended action.
And if I could provide some clarification, excuse me, Chair. The amended actions would be in support of making the findings to approve the design review.
As stated.
So we have a motion by Tagney. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Figueroa. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Motion
Congratulations.
approved. Congratulations. All right, so now we're going to we're going to our business items. Consider the draft Parks and Recreation element of the General Plan 2045. Do we have a staff report on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Tonight, we are bringing forward it's kind of a momentous night, actually, and I wish Julie Neander, our former Deputy Director of Environmental Services, was here to experience this. And if you're listening out there, Julie, this one is for you. We've been working off of our 1994, I believe it was, Parks and Rec element that was included in the 2000 update to the general plan, which I guess in 2000 felt pretty fresh. We had just finished our Parks and Rec master plan in 97, and so we didn't update and adopt a new element that was consistent with the new form and style of our general plan. If you look through our general plan, you know, you're flipping through the nicely formatted pages. It's kind of a record scratch when you get to the Parks and Rec element. It's in dot matrix, and it's got, you know, old school graphics, which are quaint, but they didn't conform to our current standards. And so we've been working to update our Parks and Rec element and looking for an opportunity to do that for at least the last 10 years, as we state in the staff report here. And really, with the update of the Parks and Rec master plan in 2010, we had a clear bead on current outreach and engagement to update that Parks and Rec element. We worked with Plan West Partners through the general plan update contract that we have with them to produce a new Parks and Rec element. The draft is here before you, starting on packet page 64. And it largely conforms to the format that we have for the rest of our elements, doing a little bit of introduction with some, you know, high-level information around the topic. And then it goes into really three policy areas. They're noted on packet page 70. The policy areas are park standards, park development and maintenance, and coordinated open space park and recreational facilities planning and use. And so those are the three policy areas that we approach under these guiding principles that are on that same page. The intent for this item tonight is really to allow you the opportunity and the public the opportunity to see this Parks and Rec element for the first time. Similar to the rest of the elements that we brought forward in draft form to the Planning Commission, we're really just having a release party and letting these documents out for the public to start reviewing. This particular document, because it's brand new, has already gone through a pretty significant review by the Parks and Rec Committee. I believe they've had at least three prior meetings where they've evaluated and reviewed this. It's gone through a staff review and is now before you, with that vetting. And so if you wish to have, detailed deliberations and discussion on these items within here, you're more than welcome to, but it really is just an attempt at this point to bring this out and have it under review so that we can all have the community conversation about whether and how to amend this.
Okay, so staff is looking for recommendations and comments. Does anyone have recommendations or comments?
I do.
Oh,
Go.
I didn't see anything in here about walkability to parks, access sidewalks that might be missing, like, for example, this trail that's going to go from Shea Park out West End Road. It's going to go right past one of our parks. I assume there's going to be connectivity to that trail. I can't imagine there wouldn't. But another example is Redwood Park from Bayview. To try to walk into Redwood Park is a really difficult thing. There's a very difficult blind corner. And I don't know if it's on parks to include that in their plan or if it's on, Traffic Safety Committee or other avenues. But it feels like a really important piece, like so that kids can get on a bike or somebody with a stroller could easily get to these parks. It feels like something that should be somehow a target of this wonderful report. Not criticizing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I do think that that falls under other elements. Some of that could be identified in the circulation element. Some of that policy is housed in the open space element, where we talk about, making sure there's connectivity between these, these amenities. And so I do think that it, is identified in other areas. I don't know that those specific locations are specifically identified, but they're, areas that we can, highlight and bring forward in those other elements as well. That's a really good point.
Yeah, first, thank you very much for mentioning Julie Neander's hard work as well as the committee. And I know this has been a long time coming, which brings up a question. The plan and its policies refer to the 2010 master plan repeatedly, and there's one policy that says that the master plan should be updated every 10 years. So it's been 12 years, and we're referring to a 12-year-old master plan. So does this then trigger an update to the master plan, or are we assuming that the element is, in effect, a new master plan? In other words, is the city updating the 2010 master plan? That's the first question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We did have that discussion internally as well. And I think where we landed was that the 2010 master plan really is a, still valid and guiding document. Part of the beauty of the master plan was the depth of public engagement that went into it. And so, I think that ensuring that we're, reaching back out to the community and validating, verifying that, that those, amenities and the types of recreational facilities that were identified in there are still, valid and relevant. The element itself is high level enough to be able to support changes in that master plan. And so there, because it's still very relevant, because even though it's, 12 years old now, it, it would, fall within that decade, review period. I do think that there's going to be some, after we're done updating the general plan, a refresh, a relook at that and making sure that we're still, tracking with the community's values and concerns. It was, a somber thought to have to start that document all over again. And so we're trying to take things one document at a time. We're doing a lot of work right now. So to address your question directly, yes, we're probably going to have to update that. My hope is that it's not as much work as it was to generate the first master plan, and that it's not as much work as it is to do a complete general plan update, and that we'll embrace that work when we get there. But people flinch when we talk about updating all the associated plans that are related to the general plan, when we start thinking about the ripple effect of updating a comprehensive document like that.
Thanks for that. And that kind of brings up another 2010 thing that Dan mentioned as well, which is that the pedestrian and bicycle master plan, which was also 2010, actually addresses those issues that you mentioned, Dan, and it would be great to see some link in the language of this plan to that plan as well, because they all kind of fit together and they do address those connectivity issues pretty comprehensively. And so I'd like to see them explicitly linked in the language of these plans. I'm
going to absolutely defer to the recommendations, as we, pull these together. All of these documents fall under one binder. They're all part of one book, and so they're read comprehensively. The intent behind having different subject matter in these different elements is to, efficiently get into the material that's relevant to that topic. So we would recommend not having those overlaps and crossovers. It also makes it a lot more challenging to track updates in the future when you have policy crosswalked and scattered throughout the document to make sure that you have internal consistency. So we would suggest that those crosswalks be minimized, and that we let the work of each element stand on its own. And so if you want to ensure that there's policy that references the circulation in the circulation element or in the open space element, and that it really enhances and identifies the connection to parks, and you want to do that crosswalking before you make a final recommendation on this document, I think that's really good work that we can do to make sure that we do have those covered. But interlacing them and crosswalking policy and referencing other elements creates a lot of additional paper, a lot of additional words, and it doesn't significantly enhance the comprehensiveness or the comprehensibility of the document.
Okay, I'm getting the bureaucratic reasons for that, but considering that this plan will probably very rarely be read on paper, addressing those issues can be done in a digital version with hyperlinks, and I think that we shouldn't be afraid of having to connect different parts of the plan that are logically and policy-wise connected anyway. So a couple of other things. Thank you very much for those explanations. I was so excited in this plan to get well into it without reading the term passive recreation, which is a term that is actually in connotation kind of insulting and deprecatory to people who are engaged in recreation that is deemed passive in our world, that tends to privilege the active, that requires a lot of equipment, that has significant environmental impact, stuff like that. It would be great to eliminate that term entirely from the plan, even though it's part of the recreation jargon. And I can give you a list of places where other terms might work better and alternative terms that you could use. And the other thing is there is a little bit of an elephant in our room here that is never mentioned, and it relates to the uses of significant recreation and park areas for housing for people who don't have roofs over their heads. There is no policy anywhere in this plan that addresses that, and I think given that an entire park is now not usable as a park because of that, there could be some reference, and we need to consider policies that are humane, but that also allow parks to be used as parks if they're designated as such. And that could include designating a short-term area somewhere within our world of parks for homeless people. And I'm referring specifically to Carlson Park at the moment. We could ignore it and pretend that there aren't dozens, if not considerably more than that, of people actually living in our designated parks and recreation areas, but I would really like to see some policy within this element that explicitly addresses what the city's plans and procedures are in that regard. The possibility of establishing some type of temporary camping area has been raised by the city council and its members numerous times over the past 10 years. And when I read this plan, there's no evidence of that whatsoever. And so I think policy-wise, that's something that the element could at least devote a policy item to. And that maybe is something that the city council and the planning commission needs to discuss. And finally, there's some mysterious stuff in here. I just wanted to mention in that appendix that lists all of the acreage of various parks. Some of the acreage designations are incorrect, and some of the mileage on trails designations seem to be incorrect. But it also includes an entire list of recreational or park resources that are both beyond Arcata's boundaries and not managed by the city of Arcata, and then includes that acreage within the total of the city's Parks and Rec acreage. And I'm not sure it belongs there, even though, we might all go out to Malale pretty often and use that land for recreation. I don't think it really needs to be counted as the city's acreage in this plan. So I'm sure we'll see more of this. And thank you also for bringing it to us after the committees have had a chance to take a good look at it.
Okay, thank you. So is there any member of the public who would like to have any recommendations or comments regarding the draft park and recreation element? Sounds like not. Oh, yes.
Just real quick, my name's Joanne McGarry, and I do echo what Commissioner Mayor said, Judith said about consideration of other uses of our recreation and park facilities within our city limits in terms of emergency, temporary places for, if we were to have, for example, a major earthquake, tsunami type of thing, what is the response going to be? And when it comes to houseless people, as that's almost in some ways a tsunami of sorts, what are we going to do to accommodate people as needed in an emergency and a temporary way, so that we can preserve some of our natural areas that are currently being utilized by people who don't have a place to live, and designating places that are safe and legal in a temporary sense. I had actually brought up last week, after the woman passed away at the doors of City Hall, our baseball park, that is, in my opinion, totally underutilized year-round. And there's just a lot of places that in an emergency, what can we do temporarily to deal with this issue, and including that in our documents. So I just wanted to put that forward.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on to
I'm sorry, Chair, we have a
online. Oh, I'm
yeah, we have
sorry. I
comments
apologize.
online. It's all right. Go ahead, Jim.
Hello to staff and to the commissioners. I just wanted to, in conjunction with the consideration of the draft and Parks and Recreation element, I was hoping the commissioners will consider the recommendation of the L Street Rails to Trails corridor as a linear park. As I previously stated, the L Street linear park will be the main thoroughfare connecting the future infill in the present Creamery District to Arcata and beyond, a district that will welcome the Great Redwood Trail. This park and recreation element updates the policies and the programs of the 1994 element and incorporates the visions of the 2010 Park and Recreation Master Plan, which includes the publishing of the Arcata Rails to Trails feasibility study and master plan. The city system for classifying parks is based on the National Recreation and Park Association standards, but defines parks as types and appropriate levels of services to reflect unique characteristics of Arcata and to facilitate future park planning for the city. Arcata's classification system includes greenways and linear parks that are natural or built corridors that provide green buffers between communities and around the city, a linear park level of service will start at existing linkages and offer guaranteed park to future infill in addition to gathering and recreation for residents and travelers. It complements the city's comprehensive trail system within the connecting parks that provides valuable recreation resources to the community in addition to regional linkages. The L Street corridor is a major linkage that can be enhanced with the utilization of the existing rails to trails right of way. Park and recreation draft element guiding principles and goals include providing residents with accessible variety of recreation opportunities and park experiences that are equitably distributed throughout the city, expand the park range and types and recreation programs to meet the changing community needs and priorities, and make parks and recreation programs safe, accessible, and multimodal transportation usable by all ages, inclusive and without barriers and limited mobility. And, you know, I had more, but I think what I'm really, I'll a little bit more, right? So the policy PR2 development and maintenance objective encourages the appropriate sustainable new park design and development of existing maintenance. Trail improvements provide interconnected multi-purpose trail systems and regional linkages to include mountain bikes, fitness, nature, equestrian trails, and enhanced individual mobility. Priority should be given to the following trail projects identified in the Park and Recreation Master Plan, and it does include Arcata Rails to Trails integrated with the Great Redwood Trail. And so I just wanted to take this moment, since you are reviewing this master plan, to just once again plant that seed, you know, as, you know, in addition to what's being written in there, that this could be considered as a future park to be included. And I think it would be, you know, a guarantee within this future gateway district, and you know, and an opportunity lost if you do pave over those open spaces. And
Thank
anyway,
you,
thank you for
James.
your time.
James, that's your 3 minutes, but I encourage you to please email all of that to the commissioners. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Let me just check real quick. I'm sorry, James, is Patricia wanting to use your line to speak?
No, my bad, David. I actually
Okay.
raised when I think you had already lowered the hand. Apologize for that.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Thank you.
There's no one else on the line.
Okay, so we're going to move on to correspondence and communications. I have a few things. Do you have anything, David? David, you're going to talk about the fire department meeting.
Okay, so this is a quick one. We just wanted to let you know that we've been doing some kind of end of year housekeeping in terms of preparing for 2023. December has been a really beautifully quiet month. I don't know if you've noticed, but January is going to pick right up again. So we will be planning to present just, you know, projecting forward into the next few months in your first meeting of 2023 and trying to set some context for the commission about where we've been and where we're going with the infill program. And also before then, we might be reaching out to try and schedule the first of our form-based code workshops, which will be outside of a regular meeting. So be prepared for that. And more on that in January.
Then I just have a couple of quick things. One, that the City Council is taking up the Planning Commission's recommendation to enhance the scope of the form-based code contract that we have to provide more engagement, more detailed graphics, and additional work on developing that form-based code on December 21st. So they'll be taking that recommendation up at that time. And then you wanted an update on the fire department?
Yeah, people had some questions about why we didn't do it tonight. It was just...
Yeah, I've reached out to the Arcata Fire to schedule for either the first or second meeting in January. It's not on the agenda tonight, in part an oversight as to getting that onto the agenda. I apologize. Is that sufficient?
I forgive you.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a couple of things. One is I went to Cal Poly has the Ollie OLLI. And they had a meeting yesterday, a Zoom meeting, like a seminar, and Chris Dart from Danco was there, and Beth Matasudo from Rural Community Housing. Masamoto, yeah, and it was titled The Affordable Housing Challenge. And I encourage all the commissioners to go back and find that and review it. It is an hour and 20 minutes, and it was worth every single minute. It was very informative and very relevant to the Gateway and what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish here. It was very worth it.
And how do we find it?
I will send you the link.
Great.
I'll try to get it. I'll send you the link. So that was one thing. I was just very happy that I took an hour and a half out of my day to do that. It was worth every minute. And then I also wanted to know, I don't know if I can talk about this, but on the multifamily project recreational space requirements, that's, I think it's code 9.42.130, multifamily and small single lots. It's in our code. We keep, this is where the 150 square feet of private outdoor space, and then, you know, depending on where, like tonight it was 1,000 square feet common space. So we keep making exceptions to that, and I wonder if we need to just amend that code. Is that something we want to put on the agenda for a future meeting? And just, we keep making exception at time after time after time, and I'm thinking maybe it's time to change it. So what does the commission think?
Yeah, I'd offer that having deliberations amongst commissioners is probably not appropriate for communications at this time, but I'll just respond briefly at the staff level that there are many cleanup items that we've seen, you know, over the last couple decades implementing the land use code that we'll be bringing forward as amendments after we get through the general plan process. And that's certainly one of them. I mean, you just, as you mentioned, you approved an amendment to that standard tonight. We put our heads together. I don't think we can come up with a single project where the Planning Commission has ever required 150 square feet of private outdoor open space. So clearly in need of refreshing. You bumped into a couple of items tonight with the hillside development standards that, you know, are bugaboos that we'd like to, you know, try and fix. There are, you know, several other areas that will be bringing forward amendments to the land use code as we go through this planning process.
Is there anything else? Oh, yes, go ahead.
I'm wondering about the new construction on the Zanzi's Mad River Parkway business park area. It looks like maybe Dutch Brothers is building something there. I recall that the Planning Commission spent an outrageous amount of time on an extremely detailed set of design criteria for that development agreement, which the city is apparently now basically completely disregarded. And I'd like to suggest that we either come forward and dump our side of the contract since it has been disregarded, or do something clearly out there in the public to explain the design standards that will be used on that site, since they are not the ones that were approved in the development agreement, and which the Planning Commission took numerous meetings to deliberate over and recommend. Perhaps we can get that onto a future agenda, but it may be a city council item, since it is the city itself which is the party to that development agreement and not the Planning Commission. Approving those buildings that do not conform to those design standards, I believe, is something that community development staff is involved with.
So we have quite a few things for the agenda next time. So is there anything else?
Yeah, I guess I just, thank you for all of those recommendations. I don't think that those are all going to come in your first meeting in January. So just wanted to set the expectations.
Okay, if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.